fourth DAREtalk webinar organised by the DARE Forum and DEEP. My name is Amy Skinner and I'm DEEP's Research Officer. I have the pleasure of moderating this discussion today, which is going to explore the role of development education in engaging citizens for social justice in times of crisis. At DEEP, we've just published a research report on this topic, and I'm lucky today to be joined by three panelists who are at the heart of the research process and who will share their findings with us today. The research took place in Portugal, Greece and Cyprus, all countries which, as you know, have been hit particularly hard by the economic crisis, austerity measures and rising unemployment. So today we have a representative from each of these countries. First of all, I would like to introduce Sandra Oliveira, who was the lead researcher in Portugal and is also a consultant at For Change. Then we have Kirsten Wittig-Ferguson, also with us today. Kirsten is head of the Global Education Unit at Future World Centre in Cyprus, and Kirsten also facilitated the Action Research workshop which took place in Cyprus. And last but not least, we have Rina Savrami, who is from the Hellenic Platform for Development, and Rina was a participant in the research workshop in Greece. So just before we get started with the discussion, I would just like to remind you that you that are watching the webinar, you're able to ask questions to the panel and pose your comments as well. You can do this by putting your questions into the chat box, which you will see on your screen. And my colleague Martin Curtius, he's moderating the chat box, and he will select a couple of your questions to put to the panel towards the end of the webinar. So to start with, Sandra, as we all know, citizens' engagement with global justice issues is indeed one of the core aims of development education. Yet there's been little exploration within the sector of what we really mean by this term engagement. In Portugal, you had a very interesting discussion about whether engagement is actually the same as mobilization, so whether engaging somebody is the same as mobilizing somebody. Would you be able to explain a little bit to us about the discussions that went on behind this?
Thank you, Amy. Good afternoon to everyone. There was a very interesting discussion in Portugal. We started exactly with this idea of translating the term engagement into Portuguese. And there was the same difficulties, I think, in either in Cyprus and in Greece. How to translate such a complex term from English to Portuguese? Well, we found that with the participants that maybe the term involvement was more agreeing with the phases and with the practices of development educators in Portugal than mobilization. This meaning that it's not necessarily a mobilization to an action, to a concrete action or to a one-time action, but as they see engagement much more as a process. Involvement is a better word. Also, there was a very interesting quote from one of the participants that he said that we should not intervene, development educators should not intervene to seduce into action, into a one-time mass action, but mostly to stimulate reflection. And that is a very interesting quoting that we introduced in the report, because the idea of development education is much more of engaging people in global education, not as a marketing or a communication action or project. It's to activate and support a learning process much more. So there's much more to say about this, but to keep it short.
Oh. Hello?
Amy?
Sorry,
Yes.
can you hear me now? Yeah.
Yes.
Within development education, we have a wide range of activities, some which focus mainly on the educational process, which is normally an open learning process, open learning outcomes, and then we have others which focus more on campaigning perhaps or advocacy activities which often lead to predetermined forms of engagement. Kirsten, if we turn to you now, in terms of, I mean, that's one of the challenges that came out of the research. If we come to you and we ask, I mean, what would you say were some of the main challenges that the development education sector faces at the moment in terms of engaging citizens for social justice?
Thank you, Amy. Good afternoon from my side as well. So in terms of challenges, I think we came up with 4 main types of challenges that we face. One, it's contextual challenges. Then we have strategic challenges. We have challenges of different scales, and then we have logistic challenges. So if I go through them maybe one by one. In terms of the contextual challenges, we really found out that DARE is very disconnected sometimes from the local context and the local reality, and like we said, oftentimes works very much in its own little bubble and very focused on itself, but disconnected from what's actually happening around in the society and on the grassroots movement. And also maybe the challenge of bringing in the global perspective into what is happening on the local level, which especially with the context of the crisis became quite apparent that a lot of the local activities, might be very focused on something very local, and the DARE community has a bit of the challenge of how to integrate the global dimension into this. Then in terms of more strategic challenges, it's true that we don't really have a very good concept of engagement strategy. So a lot of the engagement happens on a very ad hoc level, very project-related and project-based, but not really as a planned long-term engagement strategy. Also, oftentimes we might lack a sense of ownership by the people that we actually want to engage. And then we might have the problem that we're not sure whether we want a very specific change, or we want a more open change process. Do we want change towards a specific cause, or do we want to leave it open for the participants to develop their own change? And how radical do we want the change to be? Do we want to be political? Do we want to leave it a bit more open to an experimental level? And the other problem maybe is that because we're talking about social change, the impact is not necessarily visible very quickly afterwards. So people might get disengaged because they don't see the positive result of what they have been working for. And then also the question in terms of the scale, like, are we trying to engage a wide mass of people, but maybe we might be superficial, or is it more important for us to get a smaller group of people engaged, but go deeper into the engagement and get these people much more involved? And then that maybe was mentioned before in terms of logistics, maybe that we are very project focused, we might be very constrained in our time, and we might not have the resources that are really necessary in order to engage the people that we want to engage, or to the level that we want to engage them.
Okay, very interesting. Thank you, Kirsten. Indeed, there was a lot of discussion, in the research process on the levels of engagement that we're trying to achieve through development education. Are we trying to engage people on a local level with national issues, or more with global issues? How can we make those links between the different levels? And also what we expect from engagement. So do we expect, like you said, Kirsten, I mean, action on a large level, or is personal, maybe small changes, is that also a form of engagement? If we bring it onto this idea of making engagement meaningful and relating it to the local level, Marina, in Greece, we're just, if we're talking about, Kirsten's just given us an idea of the general challenges that the development education sector is facing in terms of engagement. And some of these challenges are accentuated because of the crisis context that all of 3 of these countries have been facing. In some cases, this has led to an increase in citizens' engagement as a response to the crisis, and citizens taking initiatives and greater action in response to it. But in other cases, it's also led to disengagement, or a sense of apathy or passivity, that you can't change anything, and also in some cases maybe a rise in individualism or nationalism. What kind of challenges did you find through the research that the development education sector is facing in this context of crisis?
Thank you, Amy. As you said already before, the crisis has created different contexts. From the one part, some people are more close to their individual problems, and they cannot find a connection between local to global. On the other hand, some new movements and local initiatives have been created. So there is a challenge to see how we can combine these. So for their practitioners, there are three important challenges. The first challenge is related to the new citizens movement and initiatives. Do we have to see that probably as a threat or an opportunity for us to cooperate with these movements? The new movements, I think, that appear challenge development educators to question and rethink how does change can occur at local and global level. The research has shown that bridges can be created between the DARE practitioners and the broader civil society organizations, movement and initiatives. The main opportunity I think that crisis has opened is that is a chance to demonstrate some alternatives. Therefore, we have to discover new ways to connect with these movements. In order to collaborate in the best possible way. The second challenge, and I think one of the major challenges directors have to face during the crisis, is to link local and global. This was
Okay, sorry, we seem to have lost Marina there. Are you there, Marina?
and
Okay.
this should be used as an opportunity to make local and
Sorry,
global.
Marina, we lost you for a while. Can you just repeat your last sentences? The last challenge you were talking about?
The second challenge was the challenge to create, global to local and vice versa. That was something that was also pointed in the national seminar research, in Greece. The world is interconnected, so that should be used as an opportunity to make global and global connections. This is an opportunity to link the first and the second challenge. We have to engage with new social movements that are more local centered and can bring a global dimension to these new initiatives. And third challenge is related to the financial constraints that the crisis has created. We have to follow the example of Portugal in Greece and develop and promote a strong strategy that will permit recognition, particularly at national level. Countries such as Greece lack formal national development strategy and need to put more emphasis on this issue. So these are the three challenges that I think that are the most important in the crisis environment.
Okay, thank you very much, Marina. Indeed, this notion of how to best link the local and the global in a context of crisis was definitely a focus of the research. And in some cases, participants mentioned that during the crisis, people tend to forget that there's a wider world out there that exists, and the links that there are between what's going on at their local level and what's going on more globally. Was there? I mean, maybe Sandra, you can answer this question. Were there any? What was the discussion about how these links could be made stronger, or what could be the value added of development education practitioners in terms of what they can bring to the local level, how they can bring the global to the local level? Were there any examples of any projects that are taking place at the moment, or any ideas for how this could be better done in practice?
Yes, Amy, there was a lot of ideas. Actually, the 2 days workshops were very fructiferous. There was a lot of ideas. There was a whole morning with social and local initiatives, social movements, and informal groups. And there was a lot of ideas, even partnerships arose from that time. But just coming back to what Marina said, that maybe follow the example of Portugal, I felt that this research, I was working with the Portuguese Development Education Working Group from the platform, and they have a deep reflection process going on, and also in Portugal we have a national strategy, so somehow institutionally is quite, it's a bit stronger, but let's not, we are still facing a lot of troubles on getting recognition from the work of development educators, and we can talk about this later. About the links, one very interesting idea that arose was there are hundreds of initiatives around the country these days, as Marina was saying, alternatives connected to permaculture, to transition, communities, time banks, etc., etc. It hasn't started because of the crisis, but maybe it became more acute, an acute feeling of urgency to find alternatives, and people are engaging more and more on this. And development educators are trying to connect. Not only from the workshop, for example, already 2 cooperations after the workshop are starting with the Transition Towns Movement and an NGO, also with the Disabled Indignados organization that was meeting with the Development Education Group, Working Group. But it has been going on also. For example, CDAC and not only other NGOs are working on initiatives of food sovereignty at local level with local groups, thinking about either sustainable consumption and sustainable production methods, etc., etc. So there are many interesting things happening around. And this idea of the meeting with the non-DARE organizations and informal groups was very, very interesting, because there's this opportunity for mutual learning and to linking to where people are and what are people's needs. And that is, I remember Gerasimos, the researcher from Greece, used the word, a very interesting idea about the rootedness, the needed rootedness of our work. We need to root development, education, and awareness raising work at local level also, so that then we can make the link, because it's the most difficult thing to make the link global and local. So if we are not connected around us, if we are not rooted, it's impossible to make such a link meaningful for people. They can engage at one-time action, like a white band or going to a concert, because it's really nice and trendy and etc. But to continue to have a work of active citizenship, you really need to root our work. There was another 1 or 2 ideas more coming from this. It's the idea that from this mutual learning from the non-DARE organizations and informal groups, that there is a common need to take a stand, to be less political, have less political correctness. That is very common on the NGOs. And also that we need to create meeting points, spaces, and partnerships. So 2 very strong ideas. I finished because I can go on forever. Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Sandra. I think you gave a great overview there. And this idea of really meeting people where they are and making development education relevant to people's local realities, I think is something that came across very strongly through the research across all 3 countries. And just to elaborate on what Sandra said, during the research we didn't focus just on development education practitioners, but we brought development education practitioners together with broader civil society movements, local initiatives for change, local organizations, so that they could discuss the different engagement strategies that they were using in their work and learn from each other. And so, Kirsten and Marina, I don't know if either of you have anything else you would like to add to what Sandra was saying, because this idea of linking up more with the local level and local struggles for justice was definitely something that was highlighted as a need within the research. Do you have anything you would like to add from Cyprus or from Greece in this respect?
I can maybe just say very few things. One to support was what both Marina and Sandra was saying, that I think the workshop itself was a really good space to bring together the local actors and local initiatives and the DARE actors. And I think it really started, like in Portugal, it started a feeling of we can actually do something together and we have very similar interests. And I think maybe what is really connecting the DARE community and the local initiatives is the values, because I think we both, even if the DARE community might have a more global focus, I think we all focus on values of solidarity, of justice, and humanistic values, and we all want to create some sort of social change and change the system. So I think this is really a very, very good point to connect for the DARE and local initiatives.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a very common values are a good starting point for developing further collaboration. Marina, would you like to add anything from Greece? Marina, are you still with us? No, it looks like Marina has dropped out. Hopefully you'll be able to reconnect soon. Are you there, Marina? No? Okay. Well, we'll go on then with the next discussion point. I wanted to refer back to what you were mentioning, Sandra, before about this idea of engagement being a process, not just engaging somebody for a one-off action or on an ad hoc level, but really a kind of process or a journey of engagement. And this concept of engagement being a journey was very strong amongst many of the development education practitioners. So if we understand engagement in this way, what is the role of a development education practitioner within this process, or how can development education facilitate somebody's engagement process? Maybe we can start with you, Sandra.
Yes. The idea of development education as a process is not a new one. The idea of the integral individual development comes with this idea of process. Sometimes a lot of the participants noted that the focus on project cycle, that development education is very centered on project cycle, on their projects and actions. The idea that we are very closed in our offices and we don't get out, so lacking this linking to local, also reflects here. Campaigning has been focused, and campaigning is needed. It's not that it's not needed. It's a very good tool. But sometimes there has been a fashion to make campaigns and to make one-time actions because they seem to have more impact, more public impact, and we use the same tools, communication, marketing tools, to achieve the target groups. But this idea of process is essential because we are more and more concerned about what is the real impact of our actions, what is the real impact of development education work. And considering this, and all the discussion on the workshops in Portugal, Greece, and Cyprus, we established that the role of the development educator is very important for everyone in order to know what do we want to engage for and how are we going to engage for. We need first to discover what is our role. Are we going to have a more active role? Are we going to be change makers? Or are we going to be just facilitators? So we determined 4 main roles from the discussion. One is the development educator as a facilitator or a mediator. It's a very bottom-up approach. It's a bit risky because it depends a lot from the individual engagement, and also as it is not oriented to a specific action, it can lead to some impotence feeling because we don't give the participants, the citizen, an immediate solution. A second role that we identified, that was discussed, was the development educator as a bridge builder, as the one that makes the links, that links not only the global and the local, but links people, links information, links, for example, all these experimentation, social innovation, all these pathways to social change. That basically was the main target, the main objective of development education that arose from these discussions, and also with the non-DARE group, that it's somehow everyone aims at transformation for social justice. So this bridge builder has a very important linking role. The main difficulty from this is that it is not built into NGO culture to work in a spirit of open, transparent partnerships. It's not. Sometimes NGOs tend to be more institutional. It was a learning also from the less formal, the informal groups and local groups that are less institutional. It's also a good learning from them. The third role that we identified was the development educator as a mobilizer. It is a more well-known role as the one that mobilizes to predetermined actions and campaigns and mass actions. Again, we already talked about the risks. It is easy for people to be a part of this action. It is useful to engage people at a short time objective. But it is top-down, it is already designed, does not promote ownership, and it's not tailored to the target groups or to the person engaging. The fourth role that we identified was the development educator as a source of inspiration. Mainly, then our role as development educators would be to show that the change is possible, to show alternatives, to promote reflection. Enables, for example, one of the participants' example, if we show examples of historical changes, very fast changes, for example, on human rights, on women voting, for example, we show that people that through civic action, change is possible, and that is a very empowering thing. That's why we call it a source of inspiration. The risks here is that as we are not feeding people with concrete pre-designed actions, this needs to be a constant renewal of information, of ideas, of alternatives, and you really have to have strong communication strategies to do this, to achieve this.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much, Sandra. Great overview. Marina, can you tell us a little bit more about the discussion in Greece about how development education participants saw their role within engagement processes? Sandra mentioned whether it should be more about asking questions, or whether there should be also a role in terms of providing some solutions and leading people to solutions. What kind of discussion did you have in Greece about this?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. In Greece, we discuss a lot that what we need is a more constant engagement of their practitioners and networking among the different initiatives. So the most important role for DEC practitioners is to become facilitators and to provide the space for dialogue among the different actors, so that we can empower a bottom-up approach that will help develop a DARE specific strategy.
Okay. Are you still there, Marina? Marina? We can't hear you anymore.
As a second role, bridge builder of their practitioners, because there are a lot of movements in Greece now to the crisis, and there is not a strategy that will help connect all these movements and initiatives in a better way.
Yeah, great. Okay, thanks very much. Kirsten, do you have anything you would like to add to this debate from Cyprus?
Yeah, I think in Cyprus the discussion was quite similar. I mean, mainly I think around that we need broader engagement, and our role as dear practitioners should be or could be to provide the space that could bring people together and to facilitate the the coming together and the joint engagement. But I think also it's quite important, like Sandra said, to act as a source of inspiration, because sometimes it's easy to get overwhelmed and a bit lost in the process of change. So I think it's very important to keep being inspired, and maybe it's also our role to provide these examples and to show how it could work in other contexts as a to keep people believing in their cause, maybe.
Okay, thanks. Thank you very much. I mean, that leads on well to another element of the research, which looked at the richnesses of the development education sector. So rather than looking just at what is lacking or the challenges, in the research we really wanted to kind of appreciate and celebrate the richnesses and the strengths of development education practitioners. And indeed, one of the strengths was, like you were saying, the idea of being inspirational to others, and being convinced that change can come about, and encouraging this kind of positive ideas about change amongst others. Maybe Marina, could you mention, I mean, what were some of the richnesses or the strengths that were identified of development education practitioners or organizations in Greece? Marina, are you there?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
What we found out during our research was that we're the actors that sometimes we use different language for the same actually thing, but we have a lot of richness to use that can make our work more stronger. For example, we have a lot of tools that we can share with each other, and we have already started doing things between our working group, which is more open to other actors also, because we think that we can all share these tools and find useful things and materials to use in our work. We have access to resources that enable us to establish partnerships and networking. So this can help us also. It's another richness of their NGOs. And we have many people, even that are not in any organization or a particular movement, that are very talented, that have a lot of experience in development education work, that can help us build the strategy that we miss, and create a network that would be more powerful, and that can help a development education work in the future in Greece. I think this was what was mostly pointed out through our research.
Great, wonderful, thank you. Kirsten, do you have anything you would like to add to those richnesses? I mean, what were some of the strengths of the sector in Portugal? I mean, in Cyprus, sorry.
Sure. Again, I think it was quite similar. The main richnesses that were pointed out are that we, as the sector, we are very experienced in actually organizing a lot of events. So we have the resources that we have in our own organizations, the the DARE organizations are the ones that are maybe a bit more established than a lot of the ones that focus on local initiatives. So we can build on that. We can build on the tools that we have developed, on the strategies that we have used in the past, maybe through other projects, even though maybe they have not reached the wide engagement, but still it's a very good starting point that we can build on. And then, because Cyprus is so small, for us it's quite a big richness, because we can very easily connect to very many people and to very different levels because of the small population, and because we're all, through our own networks, whether it's the organizations networks or the personal networks. So that was definitely a strong richness identified for Cyprus.
Wonderful, thank you. And Sandra, anything to add from Portugal?
I don't know. Yes, there is a lot of things, but to make it short, well, mainly we divided this on 7 types of richness. Yes, and the good thing that arose from the research, using this inspiration from the ABCD methodology, identifying our assets, our valuable things that we can use also in partnerships, was that we must think out of the box when we think about partnerships or being innovative in actions. So either, for example, a small NGO hasn't got a space or a training space, or hasn't got a van, for example, to go around and make some, for example, use films as engagement strategy with young people. But if we make such richness database identification, there is a lot of things that we discover that we have. Also, one of the main richnesses, and it was quite pleasant to discuss, was the creativity, the use of creativity and art. Also, sometimes creativity and art are talents that we connect just to the individual level, and we don't bring all of this sometimes to our professional. We are very professionals, so sometimes we forget about this type of resources, and we do have, because creativity and art, it's about being development educators, being investing your flexible, out of the box talent, is also about using art tools, for example, etc.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much. Okay, so now we're going to bring in some of your questions or comments that you've been posting. I'd like to ask Martin to pose, I think there are 3 questions. So if you can let us know the questions that have been raised.
Yes, we got indeed 3 questions from participants in the chat box. The first one is whether in the research the topic of global justice came up. What is this global justice that we are working for or towards, and whether there were any differences within participants or educators between the 3 countries. The second question was exactly as now already was mentioned by Sandra. How do you, in a participatory research, which methods work best to discuss global education, global justice with learners and with the educators? And the last one is whether you have an assessment or whether activists in the 3 countries do feel themselves or identify themselves more as global now during the crisis or less as global. Does the crisis make them turn inwards, or do they stay or become more outwards, global looking? Those were the questions. More questions can be asked in the chat box and we will pass them on.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much, Martin. Okay, so if we take them one by one, the first question, the idea of global justice and what we're actually working towards when we talk about working towards global justice. Were there any differences in understandings of global justice, or how we should approach this issue. Would any of you like to reply to this question, or shall I identify one?
I can give a few.
Sandra, can you move your microphone a little bit closer to your mouth? I can't hear you so well.
Okay, I can give a bit of the ideas from the participants. The global justice within the DARE working group, the Development Education Working Group in Portugal, it's quite a consensual concept. It has been discussed, and it has been established that it is the main aim. Throughout the workshop, especially in the meeting with the non-DARE, with the non-development education group, with the other organizations and informal groups, there was a very interesting thing. We asked them what were their main aims, and mostly they will talk about justice and social justice. And then we also asked them if they were acting only at local level, or were they considering or integrated in global? What was their relation to global? And most of them said, yes, we consider that in order to reach global, it's important to act at local level. But we are integrated. Even the most for example, we had a few alternative movements quite close to anarchism movements, working on permaculture and stuff, but they state that we are integrated in the global movement. We are part of a global movement, and that is our core mission. We work local, but we are integrated in a global movement. So it was quite interesting that even the most radical local rooted movements and activists almost have this global concept as a big focus of their activity. I hope I was clear.
Okay, yeah, great, thank you. So you also looked at the last question there as well, which was very interesting. No, great, you brought them both together. What about Kirsten? I mean, in Cyprus, how would you say that there's a common definition of global justice that people are working towards, and also would you say that the wider citizenry, so not development education practitioners or those already involved in social movements, but the wider citizenry, would you say that as a result of the crisis they're seeing themselves more as local citizens and rather than global citizens?
Yeah, so for the first question on global justice, to be honest, during the workshop we did not focus on defining global justice, mainly because we had very limited time, unlike in Portugal where I think there was a bit more time to discuss. So we didn't really manage to have a deep discussion on how the different groups actually see the topic of global justice. So I don't think it would be fair for me to make assumptions. I mean, obviously it came up through discussions, and I think in general the idea of justice was a shared understanding, but it wasn't quite a focus of the discussion so much. It was more on engagement rather than on the global justice element. But in terms of whether citizens see themselves more as global citizens or more, local, I would definitely say that on the whole it's more of a local understanding now because of the crisis, and then people feel much more, well, maybe rooted or connected to Cyprus, and there's a very strong sense of solidarity within the country and of supporting local products, supporting Cypriot farmers, supporting very, very local initiatives, but losing a little bit, the global dimension of it. And also, the idea that I think Marina had mentioned it before, that now that we have these issues going on in our own country, that it's more important for us to focus on our problems first before we focus on what's happening elsewhere. On the other hand, if we look into the DARE community or into the those that are more active in social movements or social initiatives, we don't really have social movements yet, but the social initiatives, I would say that there is a connection, a more global outlook within these people that are more active. Partly it's the looking to similar initiatives, especially in Portugal, which is always mentioned as a very great example for initiatives that are now beginning to form in Cyprus, in terms of the transition town movement, in terms of permaculture. I mean, Portugal is, one outlook, but then also the solidarity maybe with global movements. But when we go to the more average citizens, I think it's a very strong local feeling right now because of the crisis.
Okay, thank you. Marina, what about in Greece? I mean, would you say the situation is similar to what Kirsten has described in Cyprus? If you can unmute yourself.
Yes,
Marina,
can you hear me?
Yes, now we can hear you.
Yes.
Oh, Marina, you seem to have dropped out again. Are you there? Hello, Marina? Okay, Marina seems to have dropped out. Hopefully she can reconnect again.
Amy, maybe I can
Yeah.
agree with what Kirsten just described. I was talking about concepts and only the participants on the research, but the local focus, it's completely common to us, and I think that Gerasimos also brought the same idea that from Greece there is this closing, and in Portugal the same, like consume our produces, worry about our producers, our people, So there's a lot of this focus on the local level. The good thing was that the people engaged in social justice work and all these initiatives are looking quite not only to their local context, but connected to global context, and that was a positive note. But it's common to all countries, I think.
Okay, thank you. Marina, are you back yet?
Can you hear me?
Yes, okay, we can hear you now, yeah. You need to unmute yourself. Okay, seem to have dropped out again. Okay, yeah, so I mean this is...
No, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Technical problems. So, in relation to local and global, I think that what we stressed was that some non-DARE initiatives may be more focused on local level, but there were some organizations that were working more on local level, but they had a global dimension that sometimes hadn't realized. So I think that mostly we connect local and global, but if we don't stress out, sometimes we may don't understand that the global connection to the issues that we are referring to.
Right, absolutely, yeah. And
particularly for non-DARE participants.
Yeah, and this was seen as one of the key the key things that the development educators can actually bring to these local initiatives is this global dimension to what's going on. I think one of the participants suggested that development education practitioners should anchor their work in real people's reality, but open windows to a wider reality. And I think that's an interesting way of looking at it. And just for the final question that we had about methodologies, so global justice, how can we, what kind of participatory research methods can we use to work on global justice with learners, with educators? So are there any methodologies that you used in this research process that you feel you could recommend to others? Sandra, would you like to?
Yes. We've summarized in the report on page 32, just near the end, a small toolbox with the main methodologies that we used on the participatory well, it was a participatory action research, actually. From what Amy was telling before, we identified the richnesses, taking inspiration from a methodology, not using the whole methodology, but taking inspiration from the ABCD, asset-based community development methodology that focus on the positives, not on the lacks of one community or one group, but on the positives, on the richnesses, on the networks, on the connectors of one community. We also used a visioning process because we wanted to build a theory of change. Eventually, we dropped the theory of change because it needed more time. It is a methodology that needs more time to construct meaningful theories of change. The theories of change, of course, it's very useful to think out of the box and to take a community or a group of learners, of students, of educators to vision change and what they want to achieve in the future. A very simple methodology for discussion of a thematic in a participatory way, but in a way that participants are very aware of how they are participating or not. It's a fishbowl methodology, very simple. We have the description also. And coming from taking inspiration from one of the participants from the transition movement, the Transition Town movement, he brought a cycle of change that he uses, that Transition Network uses for their trainings, explaining how change is not a revolution, it is a process, is an evolution. So people are in different stages of change, and they need different inputs. So on the last page, just before the references, we tried to sketch what could be an engagement cycle for development educators to use, so that we can assess each time where is our target group and what type of actions, of tools we need to use to support their engagement. Either they are in a very starting pre-contemplation stage where they need more information, or they are in a more advanced stage where they need something more rooted, more in-depth, like a visioning process, like something that connects more to the values and to the emotional side. So all of this can be found here in a resumed way in the report, the very summary.
Great, yeah, thank you, Sandra. Yeah, we have this toolbox where we also include some workshop plans in the report, which can help to guide your work if you're interested in using participative methodologies in improving your engagement strategies. We're coming up to the end of the webinar now, so just to finish off with, I'd like to ask each of you to discuss some of the recommendations that you came up with in the report as to how the development education sector can improve its impact in the work it's doing in engaging citizens. Marina, I mean, you came up with 7 recommendations in total. Marina, in terms of Greece, are there any specific recommendations that you feel are particularly relevant for your national context, and can you share them with us? Marina, are you there? Okay, maybe we can move then to Kirsten for the minute, and hopefully Marina will rejoin us.
Sure. So for Cyprus, I think, well, all of the recommendations are relevant, but I think maybe the most important ones are, one, to focus a bit more on the values, because I think it's the values that really connect us all, as the DARE community and us as local initiatives. So I think if we can get together and focus more on these values that connect us, I think we can build a much bigger common base from where we can take action. And also what was mentioned a lot, to get out of our bubble, of the DARE bubble, and get out of the very, very project-oriented work that we're doing, and really get connected to the local context and to the reality. And maybe the third one that I think is quite important as well is to start something new and to dare to risk a little bit and to create our own new visions and experiment, and even if we don't really know where it's going, to give ourselves the freedom to start something and experiment with something new and a new vision of where change might lead us.
Great. Sounds very exciting. Thank you. Marina, are you there?
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. Yeah. Can you just outline some of the recommendations that you think are important for the sector in Greece?
Yes, during the research, we think that we have to be clear about the role in the engagement. We need a clear strategy so that we have a long-term perspective. Otherwise, we risk to lose citizens' engagement and even collaboration among us. The second one is that we have to connect local reality and people's needs and use an understandable language so that everyone can engage in what we are trying to do and what we are saying. And the third one is to build bridges and develop networking with these local initiatives, because as the research and our work shows, there is great potential of collaboration and exchange of tools and materials among us.
Wonderful, thank you. And Sandra from Portugal?
Besides all the above, I would choose this idea of meeting people where they are. So tailoring engagement strategies to people's needs, and linking again with this cycle of engagement and of change, allowing people to have different entry points. There was an interesting discussion on we must not frustrate people, for example, young people that just come and need to engage in some action, yes, and sometimes it's not the better action, it's not a perfect action, it's not completely reflexive or anything, but we must not frustrate them. So we must leave different types of entrance and give freedom to people to also to take part and assume the activities what we are doing, and entry point. And most important, and I was just meeting with the Development Education Working Group, and number 8, remember to breathe, don't burn out. We need to be resilient, but we also need to remember our own individual right sometimes to breathe.
Okay, yeah, very true. Because sometimes when we're development education practitioners tend to be very passionate people about the issues they're working with, and can be hard to switch off at times. So I think that's an interesting recommendation as well. Okay, so we've almost finished now. I'd just like to say, I hope that this webinar has given you a bit of an insight into the research that has been done on citizen engagement, and I'd like to invite you to have a look at the report for further information. Like we said, it's a very practical tool as well. We include methodologies that you can use to reflect on engagement work in your context. And also, there's also on the website, so the report is available on the DEEP website, and we also have a one-page summary which you can also share amongst your networks and your contacts. So I'd like to say a big thank you to all of you for participating in the webinar, and a huge thank you to our panelists today for a very interesting discussion. And I'd like to invite you also to the upcoming webinars that are going to take place. I just put it up on the screen here. So we have okay, so coming up, we have on the 24th and 25th of June, the 24th or 25th of June, the date will be confirmed on the DEEP website. We will be live streaming from the conference on global citizenship education in Brussels. So that conference is called Citizens for Global Education, or Education for Global Citizenship. So that will be the next webinar. And then after that, on the 3rd of July, we'll be hosting a webinar on transformative communication. So looking at how we can use different values and frames in the way we communicate in order to lead to social change. Then over the summer, we'll have a break in August, and then we'll come back in September. So I hope you enjoyed the webinar today and look forward to engaging with you again in the future. And please feel free to, this webinar now will be, the broadcast will be available as a YouTube video on the DEEP website, so you can also share it among your contacts and networks. So thank you once again for taking part. Have a nice afternoon and goodbye.